Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 26 part 1 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we commence the deep dive into September of 1968, including the concerts and itinerary associated with the second North American tour and much more. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Sunday the 1st of September, and the Jimi Hendrix Experience with support acts Heir Apparent, Vanilla Fudge and Soft Machine perform at the Red Rocks Park, Denver, Colorado, to a sold-out audience of 9,000, earning $13,000. Written by G. Brow, was titled Jimi Hendrix Fans on Ship Rock. The counterculture's idea of rock music, as opposed to the latest top 40 hit, started to dominate in Denver by 1968. Barry Fay, a fledgling promoter whose career would span 4 decades, had grown ambitious enough to book Red Rocks to close the summer concert season. His first show featuring a Vanilla Fudge, Jimi Hendrix Experience, Soft Machine billing. Tickets were $4.50. Some audience members staked out front row seats more than 12 hours before the beginning of the concert. The arrival of Vanilla Fudge was delayed about 45 minutes because of an airline bungle, and the trucks carrying the band's equipment had been late. Hendrix's flight was also delayed. All the while, stage announcements were made urging those people who had climbed into every nook and cranny of the rocks above the seating and stage areas not to try and fly, as a recent concert-goer had hallucinated on LSD and fallen. Anyone having difficulty was reminded to stay put until Rocky Mountain Rescue could help them down. Harry Tuft, the MC, tried to keep the audience's spirits up during the long delays. Hendrix finally took the stage, walked to the mic and said, "For those of you up in the rocks, if you think you can fly, maybe we can help you along." Then one of Hendrix's Marshall amplifiers blew. There was a delay while roadies replaced tubes in the back of the amp. When that didn't work, they swapped it out altogether. "I'm really sorry," an upset Hendrix apologized. "I don't know what the hell we are trying to do up here." By all accounts, Hendrix didn't stack up to the competition at Red Rocks. He later said, "I had a lot of fun at Red Rocks. That was groovy and nice, 'cause people are on top of you there, or at least they can hear something. That's how it should be, natural theater type things." While Noel Redding noted in his diary, "Unfortunately, Jimmy didn't play very well that night, and afterwards Denver had nothing to offer in after-gig entertainment, or even daytime entertainment, for there was nothing to do the next day either, so we all took acid and went into the mountains." While John Merringer, who was in the audience, recalled, "I was at this concert, front row center, having snuck in the night before and hiding out on the rocks, left of the seats. During the show, kids were hanging by a thread from the rocks dangerously, and one of the guys, I think, Tim Bogart from Vanilla Fudge, told said kids who thought they could fly not to try it, keeping in mind that lots of drugs were being consumed that night. When Jimmy came out, he proclaimed to those same kids, 'For those of you that think they can fly, here's some music to do it by,' and immediately went into Voodoo Child." Later in his set, Jimmy noticed that I was recording him with an 8mm movie camera while using the railing in front of the orchestra pit. So he, Jimmy, got as close to the camera as he could and started humping the guitar into the lens. So Jimmy and I had a moment that I will never have to share with anyone else. I will remember that time vividly until the day I die. While this review appeared in the Rocky Mountain News, titled "Wall-to-Wall Fans at Rock Concert" by Thomas McCluskey, not only were there wall-to-wall people at Red Rocks Theatre Sunday night for the concert performed by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Vanilla Fudge, Soft Machine and Heir Apparent, but also there were many who demonstrated their love for rock by climbing into every nook and cranny of those high above the seating and stage areas. The magnetism of the groups, especially the Experience and the Fudge, was further demonstrated by the fact that some members of the 9,000-plus audience were reportedly staking out front row seating areas more than 12 hours before the beginning of the concert. The amphitheater was 3/4 full when I arrived 3 hours early. In my opinion, the Vanilla Fudge performance surpassed that of the Experience as well as the other groups, with high intensity, and their instrumental and vocal unity was solidly gelled. The result was one of the most stimulating rock performances I've experienced, although Jimi Hendrix's unique guitar style and distinctive vocal sound were well in evidence throughout his performance, and bassist Noel Redding and drummer Mitch Mitchell were driving hard. The overall result was somewhat disappointing. It was obvious that Hendrix was bugged by an unplanned low-frequency rumble in his amplifier. This prevented his getting into his musical thing in any measurable depth. On the other hand, seeing, hearing, and emotionally participating in the experience, even under duress, was an enjoyable experience. While Mitch Mitchell recalled, one memorable gig was at the Natural Amphitheatre at Red Rocks, near Denver at the beginning of September, an absolutely beautiful and amazing place, and by all accounts a wonderful gig. On the same day, the Jimi Hendrix experience is featured in the following publication, A Closer Look, September 1st, 1968 edition. Monday the 2nd of September. The group does a television interview in Denver, Colorado at the Cosmopolitan Hotel. This is also the release date of the 5th US single, All Along the Watchtower and the Burning of the Midnight Lamp. While at his Cosmopolitan Hotel room in downtown Denver, Jimi himself makes a detailed series of handwritten liner notes outlining his proposal for the design to the forthcoming Electric Ladyland album, which includes the rambling poetry titled Letter to the Room of the Mirrors. The poem includes the verse, and he continued until he had crowned Ethel the dog, the only queen of ears. You may ask, what is the story of Ethel the dog, the only queen of ears? Well, according to Kathy Etchingham, I bought Jimi a puppy for his 25th birthday. Jimi was delighted and named it Ethel FLOOM, and she became part of the family. He called her the Queen of Ears. Everyone loved Ethel, despite the fact that she was quite unable to hit the newspaper we presented to her, so she could do her business, and she always managed to find a space with a bit of floor visible. She used to wander around the apartment, flicking her ears behind her. Sometimes she would hit her ears and fall. Ethel became very attached to this chair and used it as a ride because it could spin around on itself. Jimi had already made it spin while she was sitting, and she enjoyed the sensation so much that it became a game that she liked to play quite often. Ethel would climb onto the chair and whine and bark at Jimi until he gave in and spun her around for a while. When he stopped, she would get off and stagger dizzily and lay down to recover, and Jimi would then pat her belly. When she had recovered, she struggled to get back into the chair and barked to turn around again. Eventually, we got bored of this spinning game, but she still wanted to turn around in the chair, so we had to take her for a walk around Hyde Park to get her mind off it. Eventually, she grew so big that I realized she was more than we could handle. A friend, I think it was Jeff Beck, offered to take her to live with him in the country. We accepted it, knowing that she would go to a good home. Buying a puppy was a really stupid thing to do, and it was too much responsibility for us at the time. Note that Ethel FLOOM's dog tags were in the possession of Chas Chandler until they were put up for auction in 2015. The following is another audience member account of the Red Rocks concert. I'm generally reluctant to go to rock concerts, yet most every time I let someone drag me to one, I'd wind up loving it. And the first concert I ever saw was one of the best too. Jimi had played a concert at Red Rocks near Denver, to an audience that included me, my roommate Fred, his sister Willa, and her boyfriend Reese. This concert had been sold out for weeks, but we didn't know that when we headed north from Albuquerque, in Fred's notorious Land Rover. Word on the street was that Jimi was playing Denver, so off we went. The interstate wasn't finished then, so between Santa Fe and Trinidad, Colorado, it was two-lane all the way, and much of the road between Santa Fe and Raton was very twisty mountain roads, marked 25 miles per hour, and they weren't kidding. The back seats of the Land Rover were not terribly comfortable either, a half-inch of padding over sheet metal. Reese was one of the first actual hippies in New Mexico, complete with long hair and earring, and his appearance provoked the usual reactions. I've seen a fair number of double takes, but once when we passed a car on the road, the driver did a triple take. In the lobby of a coffee shop in Raton, we heard a cowboy come out with that famous cliché, "You can't tell if it's a boy or a girl." Red Rocks is a fabulous place for concerts. The stage backdrop is a vertical cliff face, and the outdoor seating fits in a beautiful natural amphitheater, flanked by more cliffs. We arrived in late afternoon and somehow found a guy who was selling 4 tickets at cost. There were 4 acts. The first group was a forgettable group called Heir Apparent, from Ireland. The second group was called Soft Machine. I'd never heard of them, but I liked them immediately, and they are still among my favorites. They played a strange brand of jazz rock fusion combining freeform improvisations with a hard rhythmic foundation. I was impressed with the way they made the ground vibrate under the concrete seating. The third act was Vanilla Fudge, very popular in the dorms at the time. Time has not been kind to this band, but their set was well received. Their bass player, Tim Bogert, is one of the best I've seen. Grateful Dead fans have a saying, There is nothing like a Grateful Dead concert. I feel this way about Jimi Hendrix. His records don't quite convey his manic intensity and the easygoing freedom of his improvisations. There's no way I can say this without it sounding like a cliché, but his music was love incarnate. Frank Zappa has made a lot of fun of the love and peace emphasis of the hippie era, but Jimi meant it. I saw Carlos Santana recently, and he carries on this same message of love. It was probably no accident that Santana was wearing a shirt with Jimi's picture on it. I've never experienced music this intense anywhere else. It was hard just to track it, just to try to hear everything that was going on, in the storm of music that came out of the big stacks of Marshall amps. Jimi didn't use a lot of special effects, just a wah-wah pedal, and a lot of feedback. There were some technical problems with the show. Jimi started out with about 9 Marshall amplifiers, and he destroyed at least 3 of them, although the roadies managed to resuscitate one. Right at the beginning of Purple Haze, he broke his high string, but he didn't stop. With his knowledge of bar chords, all he had to do was move up the neck a bit. The song sounded just fine to me. At the end of the song, he asked for a roadie to bring out his spare guitar, then started changing the string. By the time the roadie brought the spare out, he not only had the string replaced, but had it in tune as well. And this is tricky on a Stratocaster, because the tremolo bar has a big spring in it, so that when you tighten one string, you loosen all the other ones. He must have gone through guitars on this tour. At the end of the set, he used his guitar to smash one of the amps. I saw Jimi 3 times, and each time the same thing happened. As the crowd filed out, I noticed that they were divided in their reaction. About half were mumbling about all the mistakes he made, and complaining that he didn't play the songs at all like the versions on his albums. And the other half were mumbling about how they had just seen God playing the guitar for an hour and a half. I blame the varied reactions on Hendrix's love of freewheeling improvisation. He usually played the opening chorus, more or less straight, and then took off for the stratosphere. Some people go for that, some don't. His studio albums simply don't give the feeling of his live performances. Tuesday the 3rd of September, and The Experience performs at the Balboa Stadium, San Diego, California. Reviews were highly positive of Hendrix's masterful guitar playing, but some felt disappointed that his usual stage antics of burning guitars and smashing amplifiers were missing. Partial set list for the show: Fire, Little Wing, Foxy Lady, Red House, Sunshine of Your Love, and Hey Joe. Hendrix Head's Concert Tonight in Balboa was the title of the following promotional piece. Singer-guitarist Jimi Hendrix will head a concert bill tonight starting at 8:30 in Balboa Stadium, and the San Diego promoter of the event, James Pagney, expects all of the 8,000 seats to be filled. Appearing with Hendrix will be the Heir Apparent, the Soft Machine, and the Vanilla Fudge. Hendrix, originally from Seattle, found success in England after several years pursuing a so-so career in this country. He subsequently rocked such European cities as Stockholm and Copenhagen with his Experience trio, which also includes drummer Mitch Mitchell and bassist-guitarist Noel Redding. The Heir Apparent is the second Irish rock group to perform in the United States. Their predecessors were Van Morrison and Them. The Soft Machine is an English group, and the Vanilla Fudge is American. While the day after, the San Diego Union ran the following review titled Jimi Hendrix Plays to 9,000 at Balboa by Dick Barnes. The Jimi Hendrix Experience turned on a hip, happy crowd of 9,000 persons in Balboa Stadium last night, with a strangely restrained but brilliant musical exhibition. Hendrix, resplendent in red velvet pants and a psychedelic shirt, his wild hair close-cropped, worked his way smoothly through his biggest hits. The group's sound, a unique frenzied blend of Negro blues and electric rock, which utilizes the most modern gimmicks, capped a fine 3.5-hour show. Gone from the Experience performance were the sensational stage gestures and erotic caperings, which have marked the group since its birth in 1966. Hendrix discarded most of the histrionics during his 50-minute set to concentrate on showing the fans what he learned in 5 years of playing guitar for the finest rhythm and blues bands in the nation. He delighted the enthusiastic audience with Little Wing, using an interesting wah-wah effect, Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire and Foxy Lady. In an instrumental version of Cream's A Sunshine of Your Love, the Experience and Hendrix in particular eclipsed the English trio's performance. Foxy Lady and Red House both provided fine showcases for Hendrix's fine picking ability, a mark of his long apprenticeship, in the bands of Little Richard, King Curtis and Joey D. Performing on a makeshift stage in the concrete confines of the vast Balboa Stadium seems to be the privilege of a few groups, with the rare ability to bring the grey, grim monster to life. While the San Diego Evening Tribune ran a piece titled, "Rock King Proves He Deserves Throne" by Monty Norris. In current rock music they call him the King, and last night in Balboa Stadium nearly 9,000 of his subjects gathered to pay singer-guitarist Jimi Hendrix tribute, but in some respects he let them down. "Sorry," he told his audience, before he wrapped up his 50-minute show with Hey Joe, one of his biggest hits, "I feel like I'm falling asleep." And after he finished 4 minutes worth of the rock blues tune, he put down his guitar and said apologetically, "Thanks for coming, I'm sorry," and quietly walked off stage where a grey Cadillac sedan carried him quickly out of the stadium. The following review: Balboa Stadium. Music in the landing pattern was written by Frank Coker. In September 1968, Jimi Hendrix came to town. Vanilla Fudge and Soft Machine opened the evening, and the machine played without a guitarist. The guy they fired shortly before turned out to be Andy Summers, later of the Police. The early jazz rock band's bassist played great solos of his own using a fuzz pedal. Hendrix arrived by limousine, said to be due to a late plane arrival, and told the crowd he was dead tired. The stage antics he was becoming known for were mostly absent. He mostly stood and played guitar fantastic, shrieking, and fast lead guitar, unheard of or even imagined before that night by anybody in the crowd, including the 19-year-old aspiring blues rock guitarist, yours truly, several rows up in the second deck. Though his trio had a great drummer, Hendrix sounded like a whole band by himself, one with 3 guitars, a band with a lead guitarist from another planet. Festival seating limited what patrons could carry into Balboa in the way of bottled alcohol, but times and security were more laid back then. Flasks of wine seemed to be okay at most events, and quilts or cushions for sitting were the norm. A few of the more colourful characters from the local concert scene could always be counted on to be seen circulating around. I still have the blue wood love beads and buckskin fringe jacket from those days, though I'm too corpulent for the jacket. The vibe at all of the Balboa Stadium concerts seemed to be strongly positive, people out to have a good time together and hear good music in the sun. Noel recalled that the lure of the big outdoors must have got to us, because in San Diego we hired boats and saw the Pacific. Wednesday, the 4th of September, and the group performs at the Memorial Coliseum, Phoenix, Arizona, supported by Vanilla Fudge, Heir Apparent, and Soft Machine. This concert is notable as it is Jimmy's first time performing Come On, Part 1. The Experience had just finished recording the song on August 27th at the record plant in New York for the double album Electric Ladyland. The concert setlist was as follows: Are You Experienced? Come On, Part 1. Little Wing, Voodoo Child, Slight Return. Fire, Spanish Castle Magic, Foxy Lady, Like a Rolling Stone, Sunshine of Your Love, Hey Joe, Star Spangled Banner, and Purple Haze. The Arizona Republic, in a piece titled Jimi Hendrix Big Coliseum Hit by John Sargent, noted, the sound barrier was caught and rechanneled last night, as Scenic Sound Productions brought the Jimi Hendrix experience, and although the crowd's size left something to be desired, Hendrix's popularity was quickly noticed by the consistent passings by of his much-copied Australian bush hat. Editorial note: presumably, the author is referring to audience members wearing hats similar to that worn by Jimi earlier in 1968, which incidentally he referred to as his Cherokee Indian hat, which unfortunately was stolen sometime towards the end of July that year. Thursday, the 5th of September, the Experience flies from Phoenix, Arizona to Los Angeles, then travels by car to San Bernardino, California, where they perform at the Swing Auditorium, again supported by Vanilla Fudge, Heir Apparent, and Soft Machine. The concert setlist: Are You Experienced? Fire, Hey Joe, Foxy Lady, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Little Wing, Spanish Castle Magic, and Red House. The San Bernardino Sun-Telegraph reported, after playing his theme song, Are You Experienced?, Hendrix announced that the trio had been on a lengthy tour and was tired of playing the same songs. Consequently, the audience was treated to a Hendrix jam session. Included in the session was a jazz number entitled Electric Gravy. The trio went on to play Sunshine of Your Love, originally made popular by the Cream, a psychedelic rock group that has now broken up according to Hendrix. Hendrix also included in the performance, which lasted until 12:30 a.m., Foxy Lady, Let Me Stand Next to Your Fire, and Hey Joe, all cuts from the trio's albums. Hendrix then instructed the audience to hold up the hippie peace sign and sing the national anthem, while the rival San Bernardino newspaper ran a piece titled Sauna Bath Atmosphere Audience versus Guests at San Bernardino Pop Concert. By Jan Sears, Jimi Hendrix and his experienced trio played to a standing room-only crowd at the Swing Auditorium Thursday night, in one of the best pop concerts held in San Bernardino this summer. Hendrix, a Seattle boy who had to go to England to make good, performed for nearly an hour in the sauna bath temperatures of the poorly ventilated auditorium. Similarity of the atmosphere to that of a sauna bath was strengthened by the fact that early in the show, someone accidentally turned on the fire extinguisher to give many on the ground floor a cool shower. Friday the 6th of September. That morning, the experience arrives at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, where they are greeted by Jimmy's father, Al Hendrix, and his brother, Leon. And together, they drive Jimmy to Al's house in Seattle. Al Hendrix later recalled, "When I picked Jimmy up from the Seattle airport, I was dressed casually. An entourage was there, including the promoter and people with cameras, and we took a lot of pictures. Some people asked for autographs, although Jimmy tried to stay as low-key as possible. We didn't bother too much. This time round, Jimmy checked his stuff into the hotel where all the guys were, but then he stayed with us at our house on Seward Park Avenue. Jimmy slept upstairs in the room next to Janie's. We had a house full of people the whole time Jimmy was there. All his relatives, his friends, the guys he'd played music with before, and people who knew him from school. They had all heard that he was in town playing, and the phone was ringing like crazy. Jimmy was sitting on the couch in the living room, with all his loved ones around. They were all asking questions, so there wasn't much peace and quiet. My neighbors were also excited, watching us. Later that evening, Hendrix performs with the experience at the Center Coliseum, Seattle, Washington. The following is an account by photographer Juni Saki. "I lived in Seattle during this time when I was young. Photography interested me, music less so. But when many people talked about Jimi Hendrix's upcoming concert, I went along too. The atmosphere was not at all rampant, rather church-like. People listened to the big hometown star in peace. Next to the stage, I was able to walk around in peace. This turned out to be an historic event, and I was at the edge of the stage and was able to move around the whole concert, and no one was interested while I did my work. Believe it or not, I was there taking photographs for the entire concert." The set list for the evening: Spanish Castle Magic, Little Wing, I Don't Live Today, Red House, Purple Haze, Fire, Foxy Lady, Hey Joe, Come On Part 1, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Wild Thing, and The Star-Spangled Banner. After the concert, Hendrix returns to his father's house for an after-party. Leon Hendrix, Jimmy's brother, recalled, "Later, after the concert, his old friends and bandmates from back then were waiting to reconnect with Jimmy at Dad's house. Shortly after we arrived, they swept us aside and basically kidnapped him. Together, we spent the rest of the night going around, visiting friends and partying. We went to Jimmy's friend Pernell's house to smoke a few joints, then we did tour of the Encore Ballroom and the Black and Tan. By the time Jimmy and I returned to Dad's, it was about 4 in the morning. Even then, a few neighbors were still hanging around." The Seattle Times, in an article titled On with Hendrix, written by Susan Schwartz, reported, "Jimi Hendrix proved he was a showman last night. He played on unperturbed in spite of a rip growing down the seat of his pants and a Seattle Coliseum with house lights turned on and sound system turned off. Some spectators had clustered around the stage, and the police curbed the show until they sat back down. Under the circumstances, Seattle's native son could be forgiven if his performance was less than great. It was good. His stage personality is appealing, natural, friendly, and considerate of the audience. Musically, though, he was outclassed by the quartet that played before him, the Vanilla Fudge from New York." Also on that day, the Jimi Hendrix Experience is featured in the following music and underground press publications: the Berkeley Barb, Go Magazine, and the East Village Other September 6th edition. That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will continue the deep dive into September of 1968 of the Hendrix story, including more on the second North American tour and the band's time in LA, the Benedict Canyon House, plus much, much more. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any stories or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you.